whiteout conditions, 80-mile-an-hour winds, sub-zero wind chills. It's a challenge in a modern 4x4, nearly impossible in a covered wagon train. But people did it back in the Oregon Trail days, even if it did take a certain degree of crazy. In this video, learn about the incredible hardships westbound emigrants faced on the Oregon Trail as they made their way through Wyoming, one of the wildest western frontiers. Along the way, we'll also visit some of the most pristinely preserved ruts on the entire Oregon Trail, historical forts, and plenty of other famous landmarks. Even in the most optimal weather conditions, you had to be tough, hardy, and even a little foolish to succeed on the Oregon Trail. Around every corner lay some kind of hazard, whether it be disease, Native American attacks, wildlife, or even weather. And speaking of weather, Wyoming is home to some of the most extreme weather on the Oregon Trail, particularly in the winter. Hurricane-force winds, heavy snow, and sub-zero wind chills are the norm. And as you'll see, they can literally come out of the blue.
So one of the downsides about road tripping through Idaho and Wyoming in the middle of February is that you have to deal with winter weather, which we do today, and I-80, which I may or may not have to go on later today, is currently closed across pretty much the eastern half of Wyoming. But I do have a route picked out that does not go on it, so I'm hoping it's going to be okay. And the weather's clearing out. It should be reopened by the time we get down there, but who knows? We'll see when we get down there.
The plan is to head southeast across Wyoming from Grand Teton National Park, stopping to explore South Pass, the Parting of the Ways, Ice Slough, Split Rock, Rattlesnake Pass, Independence Rock, the Guernsey Ruts, and Fort Laramie, before ending our Oregon Trail journey back at Scottsbluff National Monument in Nebraska. At the summit of South Pass, you'll find where the Oregon Trail crosses the Continental Divide, 7,411 feet above sea level. But back down at the base, don't let the sunny weather and beautiful scenery lull you into a false sense of security. Mountain weather, particularly in the winter, can be erratic, volatile, and unpredictable, striking quickly and without warning. In a covered wagon on the Oregon Trail, it literally was the difference between life and death. Right on cue, heavy winds start pounding us as we ascend up the pass. Then comes the blowing snow. In just a matter of minutes, we went from a beautiful sunny day to a whiteout blizzard. Even in the modern era with cars, cell phones, and technology, if one thing goes wrong up here, you'll be in a fight for your own survival. By the time we reach the summit of South Pass, both wind chills and visibilities have dropped below zero. And while you can't see it underneath all that blowing snow, the road, that's just a solid sheet of black ice. In these conditions, it's just simply too dangerous to continue on over the pass to the Parting of the Ways. If conditions deteriorate much further, we'll be stranded, literally, with nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. We need to head back down to lower elevations where we can get out of the blizzard and on to our next landmarks. For safety's sake, we tuck ourselves in behind a snowplow for the long, grueling slog back down the mountain. Back at lower elevations, our first stop is at Ice Slough. As you can probably guess from its name, Ice Slough gave westbound emigrants a critically important resource: ice. More importantly, you could get ice there year-round. The ice in the slough was actually discovered in the summer when members of a westbound party dug about a foot down and hit a solid layer of ice. Once word got out, Ice Slough became a popular landmark on the Oregon Trail. Unfortunately today, there is no longer ice in it during the summer, but there's still plenty of ice to see in the winter. So how did emigrants find the Ice Slough? With a nearby landmark, of course, and that landmark was Split Rock. Recognizable from miles away, it was actually a pretty easy run from Independence Rock through Rattlesnake Pass to Split Rock and ultimately then on to Ice Slough. Do note that if you're visiting Split Rock today, the official lookout basically has no view of it. The best views, which you can see here, are actually at a pullout a couple of miles further west off Highway 287. Next, we've got our eyes set on Independence Rock, but first we need to get some fuel. Unfortunately, the one gas station that was right on the way was closed, and the nearest open one is 40 miles out of the way down in Rawlins. Because of the ground blizzard delays on South Pass, there's simply no way we can make it back to Independence Rock before dark. It's a painful decision, but we're going to have to skip Rattlesnake Pass, Devil's Gate, and Independence Rock.
Alright, so this is where the trip really starts to turn wild. The original plan was to knock off all of the Oregon Trail landmarks and then head down to visit a good buddy of mine in Boulder, Colorado. But given the delays and the weather and everything else, I think it's best right now if we just put the entire Oregon Trail adventure on hold, head down to Boulder, and wait for this weather to break. But we still got one little teeny tiny problem. And that's that I-80 is still closed in both directions, from Rock Springs out to the Nebraska state line. And there's no easy way around that closure.
After consulting the maps, I think we've found a way around the closure. It's a heck of a long way through some of the most desolate terrain in the country, but if we can make it to Laramie or Cheyenne, we should be able to make Boulder tonight. By the time we're gassed up and leaving Rawlins, it's already dark. But the first half of the drive goes off without a hitch. Beautiful starry skies and a bright full moon. There's no doubt in my mind that we'll make Boulder tonight. But as soon as we turn south, those hopes are dashed in an instant when an electronic sign warns of 80-mile-an-hour winds, black ice, and zero visibility ahead. When I came around the corner and into that clearing, it hit so fast. In an instant, the dark of night becomes a tomb of white, and it struck with such ferocity, it made the blizzard up on South Pass look like child's play. As you watch the road disappear out from under you in a void of white, your first reaction is to hit the brakes. But with the road covered in black ice, the brakes did nothing, so you've got to use low gear to slow down. So much for making Boulder tonight. Using nothing but the plow guides to stay on the road and my GPS to see where the curves were, the severity of the situation had long since set in. Pounded by 80-mile-an-hour crosswinds, it's a struggle to stay on the road with just dry pavement. Blowing snow and black ice made it nearly impossible. If something went wrong, the nearest help was hours away, if you were lucky enough to find a cell phone signal to call for help. But with nothing behind us to turn back to, we have no choice but to keep pushing forward.
With Laramie now in sight, there's one final hurdle that we've got to clear. The town itself sits in this little kind of bowl, terrain-wise, and the pass that you have to cross to descend down into that bowl is notorious for heavy winds and whiteout blizzard conditions.
And boy did it live up to those expectations. Hitting that spot was like having someone throw a white sheet over the windshield. You couldn't see the road, the plow markers, the front of the car, or anything else. Just white. But then, as quickly as the whiteout struck, we drove out of it, and the clearing revealed the most welcome sight of the night, the lights of Laramie.
So we have made it to our hotel here in Laramie. It's an incredible sigh of relief to finally get somewhere both warm and safe, but we're pretty exhausted right now, so we're going to head to bed, call it a night, and we'll see you in the morning. Well, good morning from here in Laramie. It is a very welcome sight to finally see daylight. The good news is that the winds are way down from what they were last night. They're still blowing about 35 to 40, which sounds like a lot, but it's much better than 80 is. The bad news is that we still have ground blizzards and black ice we've got to deal with, but word on the street is that once you hit the Colorado state line, that will all clear up and it's smooth sailing down to Boulder from there. The Wyoming DOT actually just reopened I-80 about 15 minutes ago. But given that I really don't want to tackle ground blizzards with semi-trucks all around me, we're going to take a little scenic detour and take 287 down towards Fort Collins and reconnect with Interstate 25 down there so we don't have to deal with fighting the semi-trucks in the blizzard. So let's get going.
At first glance, conditions appear vastly improved from last night, but if the whiteout doesn't get you, the black ice will. Thankfully, having four-wheel drive saves us from the same fate as that car in front of us, but it's still a long, slow slog driving on an ice rink in miserable conditions. As much of a struggle navigating these conditions in a modern-day 4x4 was, can you imagine doing it in a covered wagon on the Oregon Trail? You wouldn't stand a chance. But as we hit the summit of that bowl Laramie sits in and start the descent down towards Colorado, conditions finally start to improve. And those weather forecasters? Well, they were bang on. The second we hit the Colorado state line, the ground blizzard and black ice disappeared, and it was smooth sailing at freeway speeds down to Boulder. A bitterly cold air mass has been sitting over the Intermountain West for more than a week now, but we're now using it to our advantage to explore the Flatirons, which are absolutely beautiful after a fresh snowfall.
And some good news on the weather front is that forecasters are hinting that the weather may finally be breaking up in Wyoming, so hopefully we can continue our Oregon Trail adventure soon.
taken nearly 2 weeks, but the weather has finally broken, so we can now continue on our Oregon Trail adventure across Wyoming. First up is the Guernsey State Park to walk amongst some of the most pristinely preserved ruts on the entire Oregon Trail.
So we're here at the Guernsey Ruts in eastern Wyoming, and these are some of the most well-preserved ruts on the entire Oregon Trail. They're actually carved into sandstone. They're not just ruts in the ground, so they're very, very well preserved. Let's go. Let's go. Standing up here makes you really realize what kind of hardships these Oregon Trail hikers really had to endure on their journey. Puts it into perspective a lot better.
Originally built as a private fur trading post in 1834, Fort Laramie quickly evolved into the largest and best-known military post on the northern plains during the peak of the Oregon Trail years. It gave westbound wagon trains a safe place to rest, recuperate, and rejuvenate. But despite Wyoming's reputation for being the Wild Wild West back in the Oregon Trail era, Fort Laramie actually never came under any serious threats of attack. Following the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869, far fewer wagon trains were making the journey west, and relations with the Native Americans continued to be strong. With a military presence no longer needed in eastern Wyoming, Fort Laramie was formally decommissioned in 1890. The few remaining troops were restationed at Fort Logan near Denver. In fact, the 1851 Treaty of Fort Laramie led to years of peace between the whites and the Native Americans. In 1861, all troops were pulled from Fort Laramie to help fight in the Civil War. The military briefly returned during the Great Sioux War of 1876, but the fort primarily functioned as a staging area for supplies. Today, you can tour the old living and dining quarters, military facilities, and much, much more. Even Fort Laramie's old post office is still standing. And while you're there, make sure you walk down to the banks of the Platte River. Get a sense for what it took to cross rivers on the Oregon Trail. You'll also greatly appreciate the modern comforts of having running water.
Earlier in this trip, we explored Scotts Bluff National Monument as we toured Oregon Trail in Nebraska. But unfortunately, a minor timing mishap left us with some unfinished business.
You can also drive up the bluff and take in the incredible 360-degree views from the top. However, don't do what I did and make sure you arrive at least 30 to 45 minutes before sunset. I didn't, and well, discovered the hard way that the road up the bluff closes right before sunset. Now, We're back in the middle of the day to take care of that unfinished business and drive up to the top of the bluff. It was a monumental challenge to tackle the Oregon Trail winters in a modern 4x4. Between having grown up in the snow belt in New England and all my winter travels, I thought I had seen everything Old Man Winter could throw at us, but man was I wrong. Despite the blue skies and sunshine, that black ice and ground blizzards were some of the most brutal winter driving conditions I've ever seen. That being said, can you imagine trying to tame the Wyoming winters in a covered wagon back in the Oregon Trail era? Even in the summer, you had to be tough, hardy, and even a little foolish to successfully complete the journey west. In the winter, it was nearly impossible. This trip certainly gave me a whole new respect for what the emigrants on the Oregon Trail had to endure, and I hope it did the same for you. So believe it or not, that actually brings our 3-month trip through the western United States to a close. We went to a lot of really cool places, did some really fun things, and if you want to see any more of the videos, I put a link down below so you can see the rest of the videos. As for our next trip, we're actually heading up north of the border for a summer-long road trip across Canada. From Quebec to British Columbia, we'll stop at many of Canada's national parks and beautiful scenery, including Banff, Jasper, and Yoho. Then on the return leg back in the US, make the stunning drive down the Oregon and California coasts, explore plenty more national parks, and try to finally visit the remaining 5 states we have yet to set foot in. Oh yeah, and we'll definitely do something about all those Oregon Trail sites that we missed on this trip. Ah, wow, what a difference 6 months makes. Until then, rendezvous au Quebec. We'll see you in Quebec. The inner storm chaser and me, very excited about that. Absolutely insane highway. Absolutely crazy. So I hereby give you Observatoire la Vache.